Hey everybody, welcome back to the most awesomest homesteading channel on the entire internet that has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with homesteading. We're not even on a homestead right now as we do this live stream. We're in sunny, tropical, 92 degrees already, even though it's only 8:30 in the morning here, weathered Philippines. Just doing a live. Well, hello Colton Alls, nice to see you. Daniel's not here right now. He's with his mother out in the provinces. I came back to the city, our wonderful subdivision here, to do a few days worth of work and avoid some uncomfortable situations in the provinces for a few days. And I want to welcome those of you who were with us live over on our Facebook page, Sick Twisted Humor, over here. If you've come over here for more follow up from that, we got about 36 of you on here now. So, hello, the Abizax. Hello, Irving Johnson. Welcome. I know I haven't been too active here on YouTube for many months, but that might change in the new year in 2024. I was kind of burnt out on. Oh, this is Ida Murray Baker. Oh, okay, from over on Facebook. So thanks for coming over here. Hello, Deb Campbell. We're going to be doing some revamping of the social media thing. And I tell you, I've already decided, for those of you who love those hikes through the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, where I just talk about life, and sometimes we see some weird things in the background that may or may not be him, her, it, or they. We're going to get back into that once I get back to the U.S. Hi, Deb. Hello, Annette Flynn, longtime viewer, longtime watcher. So I hope all of you had a wonderful Christmas, and I hope you have a wonderful upcoming New Year. So I'm just going to talk about some things here for about maybe half an hour or so, because if you'll remember, if you've been following this channel for a long time, I used to do these things called morning rambles. And a lot of people like those. I got out of doing them because just weird stuff started happening on the property. We started running into weird things up in the woods. So that kind of took precedence, lured in tons more people. So it kind of overshadowed the talks. But I've reached a point with our success, my family and I, with social media, that I can do whatever I want to do as far as the content goes. I don't have to rely so much on views and revenues and all that, because our cup overfloweth. So one of my goals in 2024 is to get back into doing the morning rambles, morning ramble type footage. And I think maybe we can meet in the middle by doing those out in the woods and maybe seeing if him, her, it, or they show up behind us. So, hello, Annette Flynn. Delbert Hughes. Hello, Delbert. It's been a while. Y'all, we're very nice and warm over here. Delbert Hughes, I'm not ready to leave. He says he can't wait to see me back in the U.S. I'm not ready to leave yet, per se, but trust me, I won't mind when I am back over there, because I love it over there. I love our life over there. Love the people. Got Colton on here. We're good friends with his parents, and he's friends with our son. Wonderful people. So many people over there. And then our life we have, we got the athletics me and my son do. I'm the coach, he's the athlete, and of course, Dearly goes along. She's the cheerleader for both of us. I miss that. I miss the kids I coach. I miss my property, of course. I miss splitting firewood. I miss what? I'm gonna get into it now, okay? So here's your talk. And this is coming up. I miss being able to go running in the mountains and on the road and not being the center of attention. And I miss being able to go mountain biking in the clean country air. Oh, Deb, you like the video of me and my family walking around the Philippines? Thank you. Annette Flynn, it's warm in Pennsylvania. That's nice. Thumper Rabbit misses me on the homestead. Remembers the morning rambles a few years back. Yeah, we're going to get back into those. They might not necessarily be done in the morning, but it's going to be the same principle type thing, but maybe done in the woods. And if you see him, her, it, or they behind me, so be it. You can timestamp it when I get back. I'm not going to necessarily go out looking for that kind of stuff. That's not going to be the highlight so much. It never really was, but it just overshadowed everything else. So let me talk to you about some of the things I was mentioning on the live stream over on Facebook. Again, if you've never read the book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, read it. Actually, Colton's mom, Lori, Colton was the first person here to say hi. Lori, if you're watching, I know you got that book at a yard sale when we were in the Hamptons this summer up on Long Island. I hope you've read it by now. If not, please do. Because some of the best life advice I've ever heard, ever come across in my life was given by that guy. He's a Canadian author slash philosopher slash motivational speaker. The Power of Now, the whole thesis behind it is staying in the moment. Don't spend your time regretting the past, mistakes you made, how things other people did affected you negatively, and don't worry about your future, which gives you anxiety. Worrying about or contemplating over and over about the past causes depression, and worrying about the future causes anxiety. Neither of those are good. Stay in the moment, because that's the only time we have is right now. The past is over. The future hasn't come yet. This is all we have, what's in the now. Now, with all this said, I'll give some more shout outs here. The Canadian Traveler. Oh, it's funny. He says, of course, all the best things come from out of Canada. This philosophy, I think, is one of the best things out there. And you know, my man Brian Adams is my favorite Canadian. Well, next to Martin and his wife Jonah. Guys, once you're done with this live stream, please support our friends over at the Canadian Traveler. They have a channel here on YouTube. The link is in the description box of all the videos I've been posting for the last month. And then he's also got him and her have a Facebook page called the Canadian Traveler. Wonderful people. We met them over here in the Philippines. They were visiting back in November. Hit it off so well. We intentionally got back together and went and spent a couple nights and a few days at a resort together just to spend more time together before they had to go back to Canada. Delbert Hughes, here's what I'm saying. Okay, so now how do we stay in the now? And I'm going to share some examples of things that have happened over our Christmas break here and why I'm back in our wonderful subdivision where I'm surrounded by, yes, Filipino people, but who are educated professionals, doctors, lawyers, retired. I mentioned there's a retired U.S. Marine down the street, did 20 years in the U.S. Marines in the U.S. Now he's over here where every dollar he gets on his pension is worth 55 times as much back home. So I don't have to deal with disrespect and ignorance here as if I am out in the provinces as much. And not by all, but just too many to be comfortable with. So what Eckhart Tolle tells us is that if you're in a situation that makes you uncomfortable, be it a terrible relationship, be it a job you don't like, maybe a job you hate that makes you miserable. And I've used the example before of when I worked for the post office. I hated that job, made me miserable. Hello, Susie Daw in Texas. Yeah, Susie's pointing out how Dearly keeps speaking in her native tongue, Visayan, and so she can't understand what she's saying in the videos. I watched their video from yesterday, too, where they went up on the mountain and got the jackfruit and some green bananas and stuff. That was their dinner last night, by the way. I can only understand half of it. And I've been coming over here for 13 years, 14 years. So you're in a situation you're uncomfortable with. You've got three options. Number one, change the situation. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But let's say it's a situation that you can't change. And the example I used over on the Facebook Live was my job at the post office. What made that job suck was toxic leadership. Toxic and abusive leadership. You'd work 12 hours a day. At one point, I worked 17 hours straight without a day off, even though the federal limit is 12 days. They don't mind to break federal work regulations because they threaten you. You know, if you complain or, you know, it's like an abusive parent. If you tell anybody, you're gonna get it worse the next time. So it's a very abusive work environment. I could not change that. So your next option, hi Catherine Gay. If you can't change it, then you need to leave the situation. Remove yourself from the situation. Hello in Indiana, DBear03, and welcome Maranatha. Merry Christmas to you as well. The good news is that if you're in an abusive, toxic relationship, you can change that because you can leave. As hard as it is, as hard as it might be to do, you can leave. Okay, but now let's go back to the toxic, abusive work environment of the post office there in Charlottesville, Virginia. Could I change that? No. I couldn't change who the postmaster was and who the managers were. So I couldn't change that. Well, and I couldn't leave it. I couldn't leave it. That's the number two. Number one, change the situation. Number two, leave. For a time, I couldn't leave because my family and I were dependent upon the money to pay the mortgage, to pay the bills, and to buy food. And my family is you met so many people who won't take a job that they feel is beneath them, so they'll let their family do without, or they'll lean on another family member, maybe an in-law or a parent, to pick up the slack, or a working spouse. I, I I've met males. I'm not going to call them male men because, in my view, they're not. But I've met several males there in the Charlottesville area who will go for years at a stretch without working because they view all the jobs offered to them as being beneath them. They live off of their working wives. How anybody could do that is beyond me because I was not engineered that way. So anyway, I couldn't leave the toxic, abusive environment for a time. Oh, there's my wife, Life with Dearly. I miss you too, honey. Honey, don't get I'm going to tell some stories about life in the provinces, so just grin and bear it. South Rooted Outside Outdoors. Hey, Kevin Scott from Harrisonburg, Virginia. I was just on your Facebook channel. Hey, welcome, South Rooted Outside Outdoors. Thanks for following me over here from Facebook. So yeah, that's my wife, Life with Dearly. Isn't she beautiful? And we are doing well, Buelinia Mays. Thanks for asking. So if you can't change a situation and you're unable to remove yourself from the situation, the only option left is number 3, according to Eckhart Tolle, and all this is explained in The Power of Now, not sponsored, just a wonderful book, recommend to all of you. You've got to accept it. Because if you don't accept it, it will drive you nuts. You'll become crazy, or you'll become bitter, you'll become toxic. And I saw a lot of this with my coworkers at the post office. There were people there who had been there for years, like 20 years, who hated the job as much as I hated it, who were as miserable as I hated it, couldn't leave or chose not to leave for whatever their personal situation was. I don't know. But they wouldn't accept it. They refused to accept it, and they were some of the most miserable, bitter people I've ever been around in my life. But they motivated me to get out of there because I knew that if I didn't, I would end up just like them. It'll kill your soul. If you're in a toxic environment and you're not happy and you're not willing to leave that environment and you continue to remain in that environment, you will become bitter, jaded, and just unbearable to be around. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that were going on in the provinces. I told one story there on the Facebook page, and I promised the people I'd give follow-up over here. My wife wants me to repeat everything I just said. Yep, my wife's watching. Connie Cannell. Dear from Wisconsin, you have made me laugh for years. I never knew you did lives on YouTube. Happy to be here. Well, I used 2 years ago, and I stopped doing them because people would throw money at us. We'd go live, and within 20 minutes, people had given us $300 or $400, and we never felt comfortable with that because, again, what I love about social media is it doesn't cost me a thing to come on here and create content for people's entertainment who are entertained by my content. If that's you, you can come on here and you can watch my content for free. It doesn't cost you anything. That's beautiful. And I earn enough in revenues through Google AdSense dollars here and through Facebook pays a different way. I don't need your money. I don't need you to send me super chats. And one of the reasons I don't do YouTube as much anymore is because they were trying to pressure me. They were calling me personally from California saying, listen, you need to ask for super chats. That's just not who I am. So they stopped featuring my content. If I uploaded a video, they wouldn't send notifications out to my 320,000 subscribers. They were trying to say, listen, you either e-bag or else. Just like the post office. You either work 17 days straight and don't report us to the feds or else. Well, I don't do the or else thing. So we went over to Facebook where we make multiple times monthly than we ever made on YouTube during our best days. And people aren't sending me super chats. We get some stars sometimes, and I appreciate it. I'm grateful for the stars. I'm grateful for the super chats. But I'm not going to push it because I don't need to. So anyway, hi, Tammy Krisky. Susie Dow, 35 years in the workforce, and I always lived by the rule that I was looking for a job when this one happened. I love that attitude. If it was toxic, I was gone. Never boxed myself into one line of work. Amen. I got a Board of Regents degree in college. It's a bachelor's. Basically, it's like a degree in general studies with no declared major. And people, educate or what do you call them? These intellectual elitist types would look down their nose at me and bash me. And I'd just tell them, hey, I went to college for an education, not a job. I got a good education, and I've never had to lean on my degree to get a job. And I'm glad that I never have, because I know so many people, especially Gen Xers from my generation, who are pigeonholed into one industry in particular. And some of those industries don't even exist anymore. They got faded out with the new economy. So Catherine Gay, are we planning on splitting our time in the U.S. and the Philippines? Yes, and that's what we're doing now. Took us 7 years to get here, but it was always our plan to spend our winters in the Philippines and our spring, summers, and falls in the U.S. And yeah, that's what we're doing now. Well, hey, Maria, Allegra in Texas. Bella goes, hello, Bella. Sorry, I was trying to read three comments at once. Okay, so here we go. Back to the lesson. I was in the provinces for Christmas. I was out there for 5 days or so, and I had to come back to get some work done. And I just experienced some things that I was uncomfortable with, to the point to where I didn't want to be around it. So I removed myself from the situation. Could I change it? No, because it's part of the culture. Um, and I was not willing to accept it, and I never will accept that part of the culture. And listen, there's parts of American culture that I don't accept, so I refute it. Um, Keeping up with the Joneses, more is better. The consumerism, the materialism that is common in American culture, I refuse to participate in that. Uh, there's a post we make on our Facebook page. Today's modern slaves are not in chains, they're in debt. And we couldn't come over here for 5 months at a pop like this if we had debt. We would be tied down to the things that would be binding us. And so that's just part of that culture. So here's some examples. So Maria asked or Bella asked if I've done any fishing. I have. Uh, Hello, Roxana in Cincinnati. Oh, Tammy Krisky says it looks like beautiful weather. It's 8:50 right now, 10 minutes till 9, and it's a balmy 92 degrees already. So I'm being shy here with what I'm going to talk about, because I know my wife's watching. Honey, on Facebook, I told him the story about when we went to the resort, and those young Filipino men were disrespecting us and cussing at us, cursing me out, telling me to speak their language. And we were not even talking to these people. We had about 30 family members there, and we had two private, uh, Coca Cabana type things, huts. We were cooking our own food, fish, pork liempo, which is like pork belly. We had chicken adobo. We made our rice there. We had corn on the cob. There were pools and rivers. We were swimming, having a great time. And we intentionally got as far away from anybody else that was out there, so we could have privacy. But a group of young men in their early 20s spotted me. And here's the difference, folks. If you weren't over on Facebook, you're better off in the cities in third world countries, because that's where the other tourists and foreigners are. And so people aren't fascinated with us. They see us all the time. But when you go out into the jungles, you go out into the provinces, which is what we would call out in the country, they might see somebody that looks like me maybe once a year, twice a year, or maybe once every 2 years. And they're curious because we're different. I totally understand that. I get that. You cannot fault anybody for being curious about something that's different. That's human nature. However, I do fault people for being disrespectful, and I won't tolerate it. And so that's why I remove myself from those situations. So we're at this resort. These guys in their early 20s who are drinking spot me. So they come over and take the hut right beside us. And they don't even try to hide it. They don't even sit there and try to act like they're not listening. They will just sit there and just stare at you. They stare at you. You look over, you see them. They don't look away. They don't look away. They don't care that they're making you uncomfortable. What's that have to do with them? They want to look at your long nose. They want to look at your white skin. So I was ignoring them, and I'd look, and they just kept staring. I waved once. One of them did wave back. Well, they were speaking in the sign. They were being disrespectful to me, and my cousins heard it. My wife heard it. My nieces and nephews heard. They were making fun of me. They were saying a lot of disrespectful things about the relationship between me and my wife, the physical aspects of that relationship. Um, but then they said something in English. One of them yells, "Hey man, you're in the Philippines, man. You need to speak our language, man. Stop speaking in English." Number one, I had never spoken to them. Nobody in our group had spoken to them. We had never addressed them. They were eavesdropping on a private family conversation. Well, my cousins and brothers-in-law, who I call my brothers, we dropped the in-law thing, started to get up. They were going to go destroy these guys. I said, no, no, guys, don't. I said, listen, this isn't bothering me, which wasn't 100% honest. But I knew to expect it. Hello, Catitude, welcome. Well, yeah, Catitude, they didn't know that I could understand a lot of what they were saying, and I did. I knew what they were saying, and it was disgusting. It was disgusting. So anyway, I told my cousins, I said, no, don't do anything. I came out here prepared for this because I did prepare myself mentally. I knew where we were going. There was going to be a lot of ignorance. There was going to be a lot of disrespect. There was going to be animal abuse, and that's another part of this story, and I'll get to that quickly, and then I'll continue with the other things that happened that I didn't mention on Facebook. So I told my cousins, they're doing it to me, and it doesn't bother me, so don't let it bother you. We don't need any trouble. We don't need any trouble. So they sat back down. Well, second thing that happened, one of the things that disgusts me about a lot of the culture is the way they treat animals. They don't have rights here. They're not treated with respect to and dignity most of the time. Now, they are by some. And again, that's why I came back to my subdivision. I live among educated professionals. These folks have dogs and cats as pets. They feed them and water them. They groom them. They take them to the vet. They walk them on leashes. If their dog poops in the road or in somebody else's yard, they clean it up with a plastic bag because they have respect for their neighbors, because they're educated professionals. Any of the bad things that happen over here don't happen because I'm in the Philippines and because the people who perpetuate the acts are Filipino. It's because they're ignorant. Okay, and we got plenty of that in America. There are places, and I'm not going to mention the places because I don't want to offend anybody. I know we live in a world now, especially in the U.S., where everybody's just sitting around waiting for something to be offended by. There are places I won't take my family as a biracial family. I know these places very well, wink, wink, okay? So I just don't go there. Well, there are places like that here too, and that's where Dearly happens to be from. So there was one of these dogs. Most dogs live the life of scavengers here. They're strays, the cats as well. I made several videos, and people in the comments say, "Oh my God, did you not see that dog in the video? Why wouldn't you stop and do something to help it?" You saw one of many. There was a dog in a cemetery. They said, "Look, that dog laying there dying. You didn't do nothing to help it." That dog wasn't dying. That dog had mange. That was probably one of 20 dogs we saw in that cemetery that had mange. No, they don't go cleaning these things up off the streets like they do in the U.S. They don't enforce leash laws. It's just... So anyway, there was a dog out there, and we were giving it some of our scraps, because if you don't, it's not going to eat. Well, the guy who had said the thing about speaking his language and all that, he had a basketball with him. So he gets up and he comes over and he throws this basketball as hard as he can at this dog. Fortunately, he missed it. The dog tried to run away, but the dog got pinned up against a chain link fence that happened to be there. Well, the guy picks the ball up and he hauls back to throw it again. That time, I didn't stop my cousins and brothers from getting up, and I got up with them. Well, that guy saw us out of the corner of his eye, and he looked over, and that gave that dog just enough time to run away and escape. And then, so the guy dropped the ball and laughed, just the funniest thing, and all his, ignorant friends that were with him just laughed. They thought that was so funny that, number one, he was doing that to the dog, and number two, the foreigner was upset by it. And you can't say anything to him about it. Listen, I'm a visitor in their country. I can't change there's nothing I can do here to change this. And I used to talk to people about the way they treat dogs, and they would just say, "Yeah, in your country, dogs or animals have rights, don't they?" And I'd say, "Well, yeah, they do." And they'd say, "Well, it's okay. Here in the Philippines, we understand they're just animals." And then they might abuse the animal more to prove their point, to put the exclamation mark on the end of their sentence. So we didn't say anything. And then to add insult to injury, the woman who ran that place was off in the distance viewing all this, laughing because she was entertained by it. She was entertained. Some of her local fellow villagers were harassing the foreigner, and they got a rile, and they just thought it was funny. And we just continued to ignore those guys. They finally left. And so that's just an example of, now, again, I can't change any of that, but I could remove myself from the situation, so I did. And that's why I'm back here for a few days. I won't have to tolerate with that. So I'll defuse for a bit. But here's a couple of the other things. Let me get some comments are coming in. Right, D-Barrow3 gets it. Curiosity is one thing, but it's completely different to be rude. Yeah, and they agree that the best thing to do is remove yourself from that situation. Catherine Gray says, Happy New Year to everyone. Got to go. All right, bye, Catherine Gray. Yeah, I like that term too. D-Barrow3, assume nothing, question everything. D-Barrow likes animals. He disagrees with animal abuse. And who doesn't? Who doesn't? Who's humane? So Jeff Foxworthy, and this is where I ended up on over there on the Facebook Live. I'm going to talk about this now. Jeff Foxworthy says it best when he says you can't fix stupid. Well, I adjust that a little bit over here to you can't fix ignorant. So where our grandparents' house is, and I call them my grandparents. Again, we dropped the in-law stuff. They're 86 years old, and let's be positive here for a minute. They love this Christmas. It's the first time they've had this many of their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren together in more than 15 years. And it's the first time I've ever spent a Christmas with them, and they are so happy. We took a Christmas tree out there. We took Christmas lights out there, and we spoiled everybody. We bought a pig and roasted it, more food than we could eat. We got all the children Christmas gifts. Most of these kids, as in like all of them except our kid, never got to open a gift on Christmas morning. And that's not part of the culture here either. I like the Filipino culture in regard to Christmas more than Americans, because my family's not consumeristic. We're not materialistic. We don't care about stuff. We care about family. We care about time together. I don't want to give my son everything I never had. I want to give him the time I never got from my father. That's more important to me. And that's what Dearly does. Dearly's gone out of her way to be at home with our son while he's growing up. I've gone out of my way to make sure the line of work I do, which is social media and writing, allows me to be at home with my son, allows me to coach his football team, allows me to coach his basketball team, because this is time I'll never get back. Hey, when he's a grown-ass man and he's off on his own and has his own family, I can buy him stuff then. For now, while I have the ability to do so, I'd rather give him my time. So the Filipino children were happy to get the gifts, but they weren't super duper excited by it, because they were more excited to be with each other, their cousins and their aunts and their uncles that they haven't seen maybe in a year or more. That's what they were excited about. So I'm going to tell you about my son and his gifts. Patty Shannon says I'm wise. There's many that would disagree with you, but thank you. Sparky Turtle says, please don't forget to hit the like button. I don't think it'll matter, because I think since I'm not begging you for super chats, I think they're just going to suppress me, whatever. Shirley Johnson says it's too bad. Hey, Shirley, you're in Tennessee, I believe. One of our frequenters on our Etsy store. It's bad how cats and dogs are treated that way. Some vets depend on their dogs to recover from PTSD. Yeah, I know. Over here, so many of the dogs have PTSD. Hey, Geneva Henderson in Texas. First time you caught me live. Welcome. Yeah, Deb, I wish it was that way in the U.S. too. But when Daniel got to the U.S., and it's like, his first Christmas there, he got what he wanted. He wanted 2 or 3 things, because that's all he wanted. He's never been consumeristic or materialistic too. But then, he came home and he talked about how some of his friends were like, wow, you only got 3 things, or you only got 3 things. I got 15 things. I got 20 things. So there were a couple of years there where he would make a list of like 1 through 15. He's like, I got to get 15 things. Like, what 15 things could you possibly think of you want? He's like, well, I can think of like 2 or 3, but all my friends get 15 things, and they're going to tease me when I go back to school because I only got two or three. And this is when he was in grade school, and he's matured past that now. And there were times he would be peer pressured into asking for things we knew he didn't want. That's part of growing up. That's part of being a child. So we're over here in the Philippines now. We've been here for 2 months. He has re-adapted to his culture. Not that he ever got far away from it. And he loves America, and he loves a lot of American culture too, especially football. And we all know he's a quarterback, has been for 5 years. Great athlete. So, because he works hard. So he only wanted one thing for Christmas. He wanted the latest version of the NBA Y24K or whatever. He likes basketball, and he likes to play the Y2 NBA 2K, whatever it is. And it was $23. It was on sale, the download. And so we were like, well, what else? He goes, that's it. I don't want anything else. I have everything I need. So we got him that. Okay. Now, here's one of the most beautiful stories I'll ever tell about my son. And I'm not being biased because he's mine. This is one of the most beautiful stories I could tell about any child. Since Dearly and I had bought gifts for all the other little kids that we knew were going to be out there at this Christmas party, we didn't want our son to feel left out by him not having a gift. So we went to the store and we found three things that we figured he might like. Okay. And then so we wrapped them for him. So, and we didn't tell him about it. So when we got out there and we were putting all the gifts under the tree, he was surprised to see that he had gifts. And of course, he was happy about that. So when the time came to open the gifts, which was just after midnight, we gave all the gifts to all the kids there. Well, there was a family who came that is not part of our family. They're neighbors of my sister-in-law and brother-in-law who let us swim at the beach in front of their house. They become friends of mine. And we invited them to come, and we never thought about their three sons that they brought to the party. I only saw the one son because I only knew the one son, their oldest son, because he's friends with Daniel. So I saw him there, and so I went to Daniel and I said, is it okay with you if I give JR one of your gifts? Because we didn't get him anything. And Daniel says, of course it is. Here, he gave me the biggest one. He didn't know what these things were. He gave me the biggest one. He said, here, give him this. So I went over, said, here, JR, we don't want you to be the only kid here that doesn't get a gift. So JR went over to Daniel and he says, are you sure? Daniel says, of course I'm sure. And he gave him a noogie, rubbed his head. So all the kids opened the gift, right? Their gifts. They were happy, but then they put them down and they went over and continued to dance and play the games they were playing. Well, it turns out JR's little brothers were there and I just simply hadn't seen them. But Daniel spotted them. And they are like maybe 8 and 10 years old. JR's like 13 or 14. So Daniel's gifts that he got that he opened was a really nice dartboard that you can hang on a wall or hang on the side of a tree that came with darts. But then we also got him a really nice set of extra darts so more people could play. And he likes that kind of thing. And he saw those two other kids over there and he saw that they didn't get a gift. So he took his two gifts, the only two things he got other than the download, which was the only thing he wanted. He walked over to those two kids and he said, I'm sorry, I accidentally opened your gifts. He says, here, this one was meant to be for you. Handed one of the kids the dartboard. And he says, and this one was for you. And he handed the other kid the darts. So as it turns out, every kid there, and there was like 20 of them at least, every kid there got a Christmas gift except one, who was my son. And that's because he gave all of his away. Rarely have I ever been more proud of my son than in that moment. And what a lesson so many of his friends back home could learn from that. Instead of going back to school and teasing the other kids because they didn't get 17 gifts, how about, why don't you take those 17 you got and go give 16 of them away? Pick the one you wanted and the other 16 you felt you had to have because of our consumerist / materialistic society. Better yet, give all 17 away because that's what my son did. 100% is 100%, whether it's 17 or 3. My son taught me something right there in that moment. And I'm 50 years old. What a beautiful moment. Ugh. Let me get to some of these comments. I'm choking up. I got to read for a minute. Catitude says that sounds like something he would do. Yeah, I mean, Catitude's followed this channel since the beginning, so she knows our family through by way of videos on YouTube. Annette Flynn says that's awesome. You had a great son. Deb Campbell, wow, that is awesome. Ernie Smith, hey Kevin from Maryland here. Hey Ernie, welcome. All right, so I'm going to have to wrap this up soon because I have a couple of relatives coming here today to spend some time with me. Deb says Daniel is such a great kid. Patty Shannon, Daniel is such a great fellow. You and Dearly are doing such a great job with him. We're doing our best. We're doing the best we can with what we have to work with. And we're limited as well due to our backgrounds and our experiences and maybe some of the views we have that might not be spot on. But we're doing our best. I just don't want to see him ending up like so many of the privileged kids back in the U.S. that they're ruined. They're ruined. Bielenia May says that reflects on how he was raised. Yeah, that's true. Thank you, because it's also a compliment. So here's some of the ignorance you can't fix, and this is just, I just can't be around it. So where the grandparents live, and I'm glad I told that story, there's a main road right in front of their house. On the other side of the road, there's another, I wouldn't call it a block of houses. I'd call it a line of houses. And then the beach is on the backside of them. And people go to the beach. It's not a private beach. You don't have to pay fees. So we can cross the road, go through a neighbor's yard, and nobody cares if you go through their yard to get to the beach. It's not like the U.S. where they'll either sue you or shoot you if you trespass. Get off my lawn. We go to the beach. Well, on the other side of the road, there's what's called a sorry store. D-Bear saying, take care. All right, you have a nice night there, D-Bear. AJ Larabi, you have a happy new year as well. So across the road, there's a sorry store. They're like these little privately run convenience stores. They sell simple things, mostly alcohol and cigarettes, probably, and rice, the three biggest things in demand out there. And then like cooking oil, some seasoning, some simple foods like canned sardines, and then snacks for the kids, chips, candy. Well, the kids love to go to the sorry store. That's what kids do. They run back and forth. Hey, Mom, can I have 3 pesos to go get this? Very, very cheap stuff. Well, during the day, we'll allow Daniel to go with his cousins and aunts and uncles to the sorry store. But at night, we don't want him to cross the road, and we tell him he's not allowed to cross the road. Here's why. So even during the day, people fly down this road. Even though there are literally hundreds of people along the side of this road, they fly. They do not slow down. It's just part of the culture. It's assumed here. You look both ways. You make sure the coast is clear before you cross. There's always that. A lot of people just cross and almost cause accidents. You got to watch out if you're driving for the stray dogs, stray cats who like to just lay down in the road. It's just crazy. It's third world. The big trucks hauling coconuts and bananas, they go flying through there. They just lay on the horn and they're very loud, so everybody knows to stay out of the way. But at night, it changes, because you can't see what's coming down the road. People will literally drive black motorcycles without headlights as fast as they can down that road in the pitch black dark. So the night after Christmas, Daniel wanted to go across the road to the sorry store with his cousins and friends. And we said, no. And I told him about these black motorcycles. And he's like, who would be dumb enough to do that? I said, you are in the provinces. I said, the most crazy things, the most ignorant things you could think of a human being doing, you will see done here. You're not going across that road. And I told him a story, true story. When I lived out there 12 years ago, there was an old woman walking down the road at night, pitch black dark, wearing dark colored clothing. Guy comes through, maybe a woman comes through, nobody ever found out who did it. Black motorcycle, no headlight, as fast as they can go, ran this old woman over, killed her. We don't know what the damage to them or their bike was, because they were able to start the bike and get out of there. They took off, never stopped. It was a hit and run. The old woman died. I told my son that story. I said, you're not going to that sorry store. Well, his Lolo was there. That's grandfather. That's Dearly's dad. He says, come on, grandson. I will take you to the convenience store in Poblacion, which means town. It was a 15-minute ride away. They spoil my son so much over here. So basically, they got in the tricycle, which we uploaded a video here a couple hours ago showing what those are like. It's a safer form of transportation. So we let him go with his grandfather and his uncle and some of his cousins in the tricycle to a real actual convenience store down the road. They got in that tricycle and left. And I swear to you, it wasn't 2 minutes later. We heard metal careening down hardtop, people screaming, and then a gigantic loud bang. Then more people screaming. Well, we all run up to the road. Here's what happened. One man and his wife was flying down the road as fast as they could go on a black motorcycle without a headlight, while another man and his wife was coming up the road on a black motorcycle with no headlight and were turning, taking a left to turn into their yard, got T-boned by the other motorcycle, sent both motorcycles flying off the road, one into there's a sorry store that they sell gasoline in 1 liter empty Coke bottles. So they had like a dozen bottles of, well, Coke bottles filled with gasoline there, right into that. Smashed it, shattered it. There was a pile of lumber behind it from where they were doing improvements on a house. Went through that. One of the women got pinned under the motorcycle. And I'm going to try not to be gory and graphic, but she skin burn, strawberries, road rash is an understatement. They had to go to the hospital. I think 2 people ended up going to the hospital. The 2 drivers, the men, they looked at the motorcycles, determined how much damage was done, determined who was at fault. They were both at fault because they were both driving black motorcycles without headlights in the middle of the night, but they determined one guy was at more fault than the other. So they determined who would pay the other how much for repairs. Then they hid their motorcycles and they took off running and got a ride to somewhere else by somebody else because they knew the cops were coming. Somebody reported the accident. The cops were on the way. The cops came. They want to know, where are the motorcycles? Don't know. All the don't know. Okay, who were the drivers? We don't know. Don't know. The cops will find out because they're not dumb. And they knew they knew because of the ambulance. The ambulance was taking these people to the hospital, and the first responders reported the accident to the police. So all the police had to do was go to the hospital, and they're going to find out who it was. And another thing too, they don't have driver's license. Their motorcycles are not registered. They don't wear helmets. They're breaking every vehicular law in this country. It's just they can do it because they live in the provinces. Their laws aren't enforced. They're not heavily enforced. There's another story coming up. In the cities, they are. That's why. So story after story like that, I just don't want to be around that. I do not want to be around that. So I chose to remove myself from it for a few days, get some work done, this live stream being part of that work, create some more content. I'm working on a book I've been writing for 3 years that I'd hoped to have out this Christmas. It just didn't make it in time. And then I'll go back for New Year's. My time will be limited. I mentioned they don't enforce the laws. They do, but not hardly. Here's an example. And this is just a funny story. So they'll set up checkpoints that last about an hour. So we were in a tricycle going back to Lola and Lolo's house. And there was one such checkpoint. It's where there'll be maybe 6 police officers. 3 will stand on one side of the road, 3 will stand on the other. And they stop anybody who comes through. They ask for their driver's license. They ask for the registration of their vehicle. And they will cite them if they're not wearing a helmet and if they're not wearing shoes, like closed-toe shoes. You're not allowed to ride your motorcycles with flip-flops. Well, maybe 1 out of 20 people, and that's an actual number, 1 out of 20 people might meet all those criteria. So those people go through the checkpoint. Now, the other literally hundreds of people that will pass through that checkpoint area during that 1 hour period, they just pull over to the side of the road and wait for the cops to leave. They just stop on the side of the road and they sit there and they try to find shade if it's possible, and they sit there and wait. So our tricycle driver didn't have all those things, so we had to wait for 45 minutes. And what do the police do? In the U.S., they'd be going down, getting every daggone one of them pulled off the side of the road. And if anybody tried to get away, they'd chase them down and taser them and maybe even use more force than that because they're breaking the law and they're going to pay for it. Well, not here. The police sit there and they watch them pile up by the hundreds and sit there. Well, the hour's up. They take off and leave, and then it's like a parade as everybody gets on their motorcycles, their illegal motorcycles, their illegal tricycles, their illegal cars, and illegally go to where they're going. And if it gets dark, oh well, you got dozens of motorcycles and cars on the road and with no headlights and children cross. That's why we don't let Daniel cross the road and go to the sorry store. So anyway, it is what it is. But going back to the three things when you're in a situation that's not comfortable. Number one, change it. I ain't going to change it. Uh, and I know my place. I'm in their country. I will not impose my ways on them. Okay. Uh, Remove yourself from the situations. Number two, I can do that. And I did. I don't have to deal with that level of ignorance here because, listen, again, let me reiterate the people that do these things don't do it because they're Filipinos. They do it because they're ignorant. Here, where I feel very comfortable, I am surrounded by Filipinos. There's only one other white foreigner in this subdivision of hundreds of homes. Everybody else are Filipinos. But they're educated professionals. They have respect. They have dignity. They have respect for others, so they don't act that way. They do not act that way. They don't throw their trash everywhere. This is clean. I'm in a subdivision that's as clean as any subdivision in Charlottesville, Virginia. So I removed myself from that situation and I came to a better one. And number three, remember, if you can't change it and you can't remove yourself from it, you need to accept it. Otherwise, you'll go nuts. I do accept the fact that that's how it is here. There, I do have safe havens. Like, this is my safe space. I hate to use a snowflake term, but in my rich subdivision with my rich neighbors, I feel safe here. So this is where I'll come to diffuse from the ignorance of the provinces a few days at a time. So let's get some more comments here. Then I'm gonna have to go. I got things I do. Like I said, I've got some other relatives coming over. Geneva in Texas, the great nation of Texas, says Daniel has always been a great child. My grandson is the same way. Praise the Lord. All he wanted was a game, and he got it. Daniel is a wonderful, smart young man. So your grandson's like my son. Daniel wanted one thing, so he only asked for one thing. And he doesn't feel that consumeristic, materialistic pressure by being around all of his privileged friends back in the... We live in a very wealthy area, too, so it's probably worse where we live than it is in most of the U.S. Yeah, and it's beautiful. Just, and it's beautiful to be surrounded by other people who don't share that entitlement mentality and the consumeristic, materialistic mentality. Tammy Krisky says, Happy New Year's to you, Kevin, dearly, and Daniel, and to everyone. May God bless you. You too, Tammy. Carrie Smith says, Happy New Year. It sounds like you guys are having a good start to the incoming new year. Love your content. Thank you, Carrie. Bella says, a chip off the old block. Thanks, Bella. Bella's an amazing artist. Bella, I've told you this before, but those pictures you sent me are framed and hanging up in my personal office at our home just outside of Charlottesville, back in Virginia. The Canadian Traveler, my friend Martin, says, I've seen that exact same thing with the traffic checkpoint. So Martin can confirm what I'm telling you. I'm not making this stuff up. And I told Martin this because he's experienced the same thing. I'll get to this in a minute. Catitude says, that's the best thing to do. Remove yourself from the situation. Thanks for that confirmation. Kevin Lizzie's Bobo says, nice. Martin and I had this conversation when we spent a wonderful 3 days and 2 nights together at a beach resort, where we didn't have to deal with the ignorance because it was a pricey resort. So we went where we could sit, two white foreigners, and we were completely ignored by the Filipinos, and it was wonderful. It was beautiful. Because educated professionals everywhere in the world, they don't harass people. They don't single people out based upon their differences because they know it makes them look what they would be if they did those things, ignorant. So in the provinces, when those ignorant people harass me because I'm a white foreigner, their friends laugh. It impresses them. If anybody in this subdivision were to call me Hey Joe or just show their backsides, their friends would look at them and say, wow, I didn't know that's who you were. I had no clue you were ignorant. I thought you were... And they would distance themselves from them and they wouldn't be friends anymore. But what I was getting at, Martin, a Canadian man married to a beautiful Filipino lady, we're friends with both of them. He and I talked about how when we're back in Canada for him or the U.S. for me, there are stories about things that happen here that we just can't tell because the people don't believe it because they've never left Canada or the U.S. They've never had the experiences. And number two, they think we're making it up. And then number three, they piggyback on that and accuse us of being racist because we're saying such terrible things about different people from a different land, people of a different skin color. These are the things that happen here. But we had to learn that so many people back in North America have become so sensitive and so brainwashed with this. If you say anything that they don't want their views of what the world is and what reality is shattered because they believe it to be what they see on mainstream legacy media channels, what they read in a textbook in a public school or in a college or university, or what they might have read in a trade journal or a travel journal. When you tell them the truth, it's terrifying because it makes them question how much more of what they've been told maybe isn't so. So, to avoid being the bad guy, we have to stop being the messenger. So, when people ask, "Oh, I've heard it's beautiful there. What's it like?" We say, the beaches are beautiful. Because some of them are. When you go to the expensive resorts, you go to where some of the squatter villages are in the provinces, you can't get in the water because of the sewage and trash they throw right into it. But we have to leave that part out. Research the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, twice the size of the state of Texas. All this litter and debris, mostly plastic, in the center of the Pacific Ocean. It can be seen from outer space. Where do you think that stuff comes from? Okay. All right, Annette Flynn, Happy New Year to you. You have to go. Martin, I'm going to steal one of your stories to tell the folks that are still here about the Americans who will only buy American products. Got to be made in America, or I ain't buying it. Patty Shannon will be waiting for the next video. Wishing dearly Daniel and all of us Happy New Year. Same to you. Happy New Year to you too, Deb Campbell. Martin, I told Martin he should tell this story on his YouTube video channel, The Canadian Traveler. Tell it on Facebook. Martin is a long-haul truck driver. He lives in Canada, north central. He's been down through the Carolinas. I think he's traveled through Virginia. He's been to the West Coast, California, Texas, all over the U.S. trucking. We were talking, this conversation led us into about how so many people just don't want to know facts, or they believe so many of the lies. He told me a very interesting story about when he was trucking tomatoes grown in Canada by Canadian farmers. Entire truckload full of tomatoes, taking them to the U.S., importing them, right? So when he gets to the border, these tomatoes have to go through inspection. Now, when the tomatoes were packed, they had a sticker on them that said "Grown in Canada" or "Product of Canada," something to that effect. Well, they check the tomatoes, and this is important to do so that they don't bring any viruses or beetles or invasive species that in from another country that could harm our tomatoes. Most of the invasive species we have in the U.S., like English ivy, a lot of the bamboo that's destroying a lot of our native species, it's because there were no fumigation laws years ago, and people are like, oh, let's bring this in. You hear it with the snakehead fish that's destroying the wild trout populations in West Virginia and Virginia. Oh, what a cute fish, let's bring this in. Then they dump it down the toilet or they throw it in the river. Then it doesn't have a natural enemy. So I totally agree with the fumigation laws. So they inspect the tomatoes. The FDA determines they're safe for American consumption. They're safe to be taken to the U.S. So then what they do is they take the stickers off that say "Grown in Canada" or "Product of Canada," and they put stickers on that say "Product of the USA." I got the word straight from the source, my friend Martin. Martin, if you're still watching, will you back me up and say, yes, this is true? So all these folks who say, I only buy American, and I do this as much as I can too, because I support Americans. I support the American workers. I'm not happy with outsourcing. But there are Americans in America believing they are buying American products when they are indeed buying products from other countries that have had stickers put on them by our government agencies that claim they are a product of. Now, I asked Martin, how can they do that? That's not true. And he says, well, by that product passing the regulation and standards of America, they are now cleared to be an American product. That's how they justify it. Absolutely amazing. Blew my mind. But these are the types of stories. Sounds like a conspiracy, but it's not. It's fact. Listen. There we go. There he is. My friend Martin, the Canadian Traveler. 100% tomatoes and apples. So you got a truckload of apples coming in. Says something about product of the USA. You assume it's from out there in Washington State. What's that town called? Yakima, Washington? Like the apple capital of the world. When I was in the Washington Army National Guard, we would have our 2 weeks summer training out there at our state's headquarters in Yakima, Washington. We would drive for miles and miles and miles, convoying in military vehicles through nothing but apple trees. So let's say you're in Spokane, Washington. You're eating an apple that says product of America or product of the USA. You think, oh, good old Yakima grown apple. Nope. You possibly could be biting into a good old Canadian grown apple. Not that it's any less delicious. I'm sure they're just as wonderful as our apples grown in Yakima. But we would think we might have the right to know where it comes from, but they're covering it up. Here's something else Martin's saying. I've seen steel produced in Canada, goes to the USA, gets stamped USA, and then sent back to Canada. Wow. So there the Canadian people are being deceived. Steel made in Canada, for some reason, going to the US, getting stamped USA, and then it's sent back to Canada. Crazy. Irving Johnson says, I drive the lower 48, and that does happen. And I told Martin this. If I was a truck driver, you better believe I would have a social media platform. I'd have YouTube. I'd have Facebook. Martin, Irving Johnson, these are the stories that the people want to hear. Because there's no one else out there to tell them except you guys, because you guys see it with your own eyes. Sparky Turtle says Canadian tomatoes are far better than ours. Well, maybe they are. Maybe it's your personal preference, but maybe they are. I'm sure they're no less better. There are good products everywhere in the world. But I do know there's a lot of consumers everywhere in the world who wants to make sure that their folks are the ones being rewarded for the efforts. So there's plenty of folks in Canada who probably want to believe there's steel. Maybe they think that steel from America is higher quality. Maybe they're being duped. I don't know. I don't understand. I don't understand shenanigans. But folks, I've been doing this for almost an hour, 57 minutes. So I'm going to have to go. I've got a couple of relatives coming, and I've got some things I got to do, and I got more work to be done. And I ran 4 miles this morning in right under 30 minutes, so I'm going to have to take a nap later. So one of the things I enjoy about being over here too, I don't have to be out there running in 20-degree temperatures. Now, it's too hot during the day. That's why I get up at 5 a.m. and I'm running by 5:30, because by 6:30 it's too hot. But yeah, I knocked out 4 miles this morning in 29 minutes and 42 seconds, which is just under 7.5 minute mile pace. Not bad for a fat old man. I've lost 15 pounds in the last month because I can exercise in this subdivision. I don't get harassed here because if anybody speaks to me here, they say, hello, sir, good morning, sir. To which I say hello to you, sir, or ma'am, and good morning to you, ma'am. None of this hey Joe nonsense. F you, Americano, go back to America, haha, to impress their friends. They don't want me to leave. They want to impress their... Again, if somebody in my neighborhood acted that way, their friends would shun them, as they should. So, okay, so Sparky Turtle says the tomatoes don't have the chemicals that ours get. She lives in Las Vegas. Deb, have a good day, Kevin and Dearly and Daniel. Thanks, Deb. Sherry Walsh, miss you guys. Been watching for you all. Continue to have fun and be safe. We will. So, yeah, D-Bear says, so we're getting slapped in the face, basically, and we don't even know it. Yeah. So if you guys want to know more of these truths, Martin, I'm setting you up right here. Martin, the Canadian truck driver, my friend who told me these things I just shared with you, he has a YouTube channel. He's been commenting in this feed. If you've watched this live, if you're checking it out later after we've been live, go to his channel, The Canadian Traveler. Subscribe. Martin, my advice to you, my friend, tell them more stories just like this, because there's no one else out there telling them. It's you guys. It's Irving Johnson who drive trucks, who see it, who need to tell these stories. All right. So you guys have a great night over there in North America, Canada, U.S. And if you're over here on this side of the world, if you're watching from Australia or anywhere in Asia, have a good day. See you guys next time for more. Thanks for being here at the most awesomest homesteading channel anywhere in the world that has nothing to do with homesteading. Homesteading off the grid.